Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for today's webinar on smarter CapEx planning for hotels, how to prioritize investment and maximize ROI. This session is brought to you by Considerate Group, a leader in sustainable advisory for the hospitality sector. And before we start this session, I just want to take a moment to cover off some quick housekeeping points. Firstly, just to note that today's webinar is being recorded, and we'll share the recording with you following the session. You can submit your questions at any time via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end to address as many of these as possible. So before we get started, I'll just briefly introduce who we are at Considerate Group and the perspective that we bring to CapEx planning in hotels. For those of you that aren't aware of us, we are a specialist sustainability consultancy focused exclusively on the hospitality sector. And since 2012, we've supported hotels to become more sustainable in ways that are practical and measurable, but also really importantly, commercially relevant. And what differentiates us is our combination of sector expertise and data-driven insights. So within our team, we have a combination of sustainability specialists, engineers, and hospitality professionals, which allows us to deliver advice that's both technically robust and also operationally relevant. And our services cover strategy, compliance, certification, and ESG data management. And we've also developed Conserve, which is our leading ESG data management platform for the hospitality sector. And that helps clients to turn their hotel consumption data into clear, actionable insights. We work with a whole range of clients across the sector, from global operators, asset managers, and investors to independent hotels. So we really see firsthand the different challenges and the priorities when it comes to CapEx decisions. And today's session is focused on how to maximize the impact and return on your CapEx investments. And this is an area we support clients with extensively, particularly through our energy and carbon assessments, through decarbonisation strategies, and also technical advisory services. And our aim today is really to provide some practical insight to help you to make more informed, data-driven investment decisions. So I'll introduce you now to our speakers for today. My name is Lizzie Coates. I'm an Associate Director at Considerate Group, and I'll be moderating today's session. And I'm joined by two of my colleagues who will be speaking. Firstly, we have Nick Walsh. He is a Senior Data Manager at Considerate Group, and he specializes in data-led ESG performance and investment strategy for hospitality assets. He works across energy and carbon assessments, ESG reporting, and portfolio analysis, helping our clients to translate building data into actionable CapEx decisions. And Nick is also a licensed BREEAM and use assessor and supports the development and application of Conserve, which is our ESG data management platform. And also joining us is our colleague, Mark Foster. He's a senior engineering consultant at Considerate Group, and he brings over 25 years of international experience across building technology, hospitality, and sustainability. Mark leads on our technical building services, supporting energy assessments, decarbonisation strategies, and certification alignment across frameworks such as BREEAM, LEED, and GRESB. And Mark works closely with our clients to translate technical insights into practical investment-ready solutions. So those are our speakers. And just to look at what we'll be talking about today on the agenda, we're going to cover firstly the challenges often faced when prioritizing CapEx in hotels. We'll then look at how to approach data-driven CapEx planning and what to consider. And then we'll take a quick look at how our new AI retrofit module in Conserve supports with CapEx planning. And we'll finish off with a Q&A session.
In terms of prioritizing CapEx in hotels, I guess the first thing to say is that hotels are highly capital intensive assets. If we go to the next slide, please. Yeah, they require continuous reinvestment to maintain competitiveness, to meet brand standards, and to ensure that the building continues to operate efficiently. Every year, there are multiple competing demands for investment, from guest room refurbishments and upgrades to public spaces, to maintenance and equipment replacement, compliance requirements, and operational improvements across the building. And all of these investments are necessary in their own way, but the reality is that they're all competing for the same capital budget. And in practice, when those decisions are being made, investments that have an immediate and visible impact on revenue or guest experience often take priority. For example, room refurbishments, upgrades to amenities, or improvements that directly influence guest satisfaction and market positioning. By contrast, back-of-house investments such as replacing building systems, improving energy performance, or upgrading infrastructure are often less visible to guests and may not deliver immediate commercial impact. As a result, they can sometimes be pushed further down the priority list, even though they are critical to the long-term performance of the asset. So the challenge isn't identifying potential investments. Most hotel owners and operators have a long list of improvements they would like to make. The real challenge is deciding which investments should come first and how to justify those decisions to leadership teams, investors, and other stakeholders. And that prioritization process can be influenced by several factors, which we will explore over the next few slides. What makes CapEx decisions in hotels particularly complex is that they involve multiple stakeholders, each with slightly different priorities. Owners and investors typically focus on asset value and risk exposure. They're thinking about long-term capital planning, regulatory risks, and ultimately the exit value of the asset. Operators, on the other hand, are much more focused on day-to-day performance. Their priorities tend to revolve around operating costs, maintenance reliability, and ensuring that systems support efficient operations and staff productivity. And then there are the brands or management companies, whose primary concern is guest experience and product consistency. Their investments are often directed towards maintaining brand standards and ensuring that the hotel remains competitive in the market. What this means is that in practice, the same investment can be evaluated very differently dependent on the stakeholder perspective. For example, an aging HVAC system may initially be seen as a technical upgrade that mainly reduces energy consumption and operating costs. From that perspective, it can sometimes be difficult to prioritize compared to more visible investments. However, if that system is approaching the end of its life and starts affecting internal comfort, guest complaints may begin to appear. At that point, the issue quickly moves from an operational concern to a guest experience issue, which suddenly makes the investment much more urgent for everyone involved. Realistically, however, the stage that it becomes an issue with the guests is too late, and it should really have been identified previously. So CapEx decisions often sit at the intersection of these different priorities, and the trigger for investment can sometimes come from unexpected places. Another important factor influencing CapEx decisions is the investment strategy behind the asset. Different investors approach hotels with different time horizons and objectives, which means that the way investments are evaluated can vary significantly. At the distressed or turnaround stage, the priority is usually to stabilize the asset and address immediate operational or compliance risks. Even in these situations, sustainability-related upgrades can play a role. For example, when replacing failing systems with more efficient alternatives, reducing energy costs, or removing future regulatory risks. In a value-add strategy, the focus shifts towards improving performance and market positioning. Here, investments that improve energy efficiency or building performance can be particularly attractive because they reduce operating costs, improve margins, and make the asset more appealing to the next buyer. As assets move into core plus strategies, the emphasis often shifts towards improving asset quality and resilience. At this stage, investors may integrate sustainability more strategically through system modernization, electrification, or upgrades that improve long-term operational efficiency. And then finally, long-term hold assets. For them, sustainability considerations often become part of future-proofing the building, preparing for evolving regulations, managing carbon exposure, and maintaining the long-term competitiveness of the asset. But what is important to recognize is that sustainability is not limited to one type of strategy. The same upgrade, whether it's that HVAC replacement, electrification, or efficiency improvement, can create value in different ways depending on the investment thesis. It might reduce operating costs, mitigate regulatory risk, improve guest comfort, or increase the attractiveness of the asset to future buyers. In that sense, integrating sustainability into CapEx planning can support both short-term performance improvements and long-term asset value protection. And one moment where CapEx decisions are particularly important is during the acquisition phase. When investors evaluate a hotel, they're not only looking at financial performance, they're also trying to understand the physical condition of the asset and the capital that will be required over in the investment period. This is where building performance due diligence becomes critical. By assessing the condition of building systems, energy performance, and potential regulatory exposure, investors can identify both risks and opportunities early in the investment process. For example, aging HVAC systems, poor energy performance, or upcoming regulatory requirements can represent hidden CapEx liabilities that may not be immediately visible during financial analysis. And at the same time, identifying opportunities to improve building performance can help investors prioritize upgrades that reduce operating costs, improve asset quality, and enhance the attractiveness of the asset for future buyers. Integrating sustainability and building performance considerations at this stage therefore allows investors to plan CapEx more strategically from the outset rather than reacting to issues later on in the asset life cycle. And I'm now going to hand over to Mark, who will talk more about data-driven CapEx planning at both asset and portfolio level.
Thank you, Nick. I'm going to address this both to those of you who are managing portfolios and asset managers, as well as those who are in hotels making requests to the asset managers and the investment managers, so that you can justify either the request that you're making or so that you can evaluate the request that you're receiving, and that all of you can be on the same page. How do you use the data to show the financial impact that is ultimately the goal of this of your investment? So first of all, we all talk about budget season. CapEx planning is something that is ubiquitous to the industry and is omnipresent. We are either in budget season, recovering from budget season, or starting to think about the next budget season. But I take exception to the term capital expenditure. It makes it sound like everything we're doing here is just an expense, it's just an outlay, a necessary evil to keep this investment going. But ultimately, these are all investments. These are capital investments that we're making here. And what does an investment do? Ideally, it generates a return. So how do you use data, and how do you use practical experience and understanding of your buildings and your portfolio to prove the ROI of these quote unquote expenditures? How do you show that this is an investment instead? The basis of this of that justification is really the direct financial impact. Easiest to quantify, easiest to show your colleagues, easiest to put in a spreadsheet. We expect that this will save X or generate Y in revenue. So that direct financial impact we will keep coming back to most often, and ultimately will probably be the basis of your justification. There is also operational efficiency, a little harder to quantify, but these are improvements to the way the building is and the facility, the hotel is managed and run by the staff involved, and how the space is used. And then the strategic value, as Nick referenced, we're all focused on the guest experience, the guest comfort, as well as what is it like to be in the building? What's the indoor environmental quality? We think of air quality a lot when IEQ comes up, but beyond just is it warm or cold or humid or stuffy, is it a nice building to be in? Do you have nice airflows and lighting, and is there potentially odors or drafts or something that is impacting what it's like to be in the building? And then, of course, visually, is it nice to look at? Is it impressive as a facility? So those are the general areas that we will be diving into with further slides here. On this next slide, and as we continue through the rest of this section, you'll hear the same terms coming up and sliced and diced in slightly different ways. So it is in part intentionally repetitive so that I can drive home certain key points, but also nuanced. And I'm going to try to explain some of that nuance in the few minutes that we have here. But there are a number of ways to look at these different categories that we'll keep coming back to in a few different slides. So here we have, of course, the direct returns I just referenced. If you are making a request or if you are interpreting a request and evaluating whether it's impactful, we can, of course, look at the energy and water savings. You've all heard these two terms thousands of times from people like us, as well as your colleagues and the various organizations that you belong to. Energy and water savings, known quantities, how much can you move the needle and reduce your actual costs? We'll get into in a moment how to quantify that. Those are the easiest to use to justify. We also have lower repair costs. You can measure that. If you anticipated a failure of equipment, or if you have a certain repair budget every year, that is a number you can point to in a spreadsheet and say, this will be ideally reduced. And therefore, that's a direct cost for justifying a capital investment. There's also expanded capacity. Can you use your building more efficiently? Can you create revenue generating spaces? Can you put something like a bar on the rooftop, a new sun deck, something, a new meeting space or banquet area? With improved building performance and with improved operations of your HVAC systems and your heating and cooling, you may be able to turn an unusable space into a usable one. Some indirect returns, the reduced labor, as we mentioned with the operational efficiency. That's something that we tend to think of as the engineering team. Maybe they've spent less time on repairs. If the equipment didn't fail, then they didn't spend engineering time repairing it, and they used that to maybe repaint a tired room or to refresh some furniture in the paint shop. But that's only part of the labor we're talking about here. If you have an equipment failure during an event, let's say, and the meeting room becomes very uncomfortable and the group starts to complain, now you have your sales team communicating with the group leadership. Then you have your sales team talking to banquets. You have banquets talking to the general manager, the AGM. You have status reports where this discussion is being furthered. And then you may be talking to the asset manager about this guest comp, this group comp that you had to make. So 15 conversations, perhaps, all involved in one piece of equipment failing. And that's loss of productivity, that's loss of focus on other issues. So it's a little difficult to quantify that, but there is a lot that goes into responding to being in a responsive mode in equipment failures versus a more proactive mode. So for your emergency repairs, again, can you be more proactive, get out ahead of the repairs instead of responding to them in an emergency way? And of course, less downtime. If you have part of your facility offline, that is a loss of revenue, and that can be quantified as well. And while I mentioned expanded capacity under direct returns, there's also avoiding a loss of capacity. So you maybe had certain spaces that you expected to rent, but you weren't able to. We had an example of a building in the Netherlands with a glass atrium that was so hot in certain weather, especially throughout the summer, of course, but also sunny days in the winter, that some of the meeting spaces built into the atrium were just unrentable. And the hotel knew that. So they wouldn't even try to put groups in those particular meeting rooms when it was sunny or summertime. However, if you knew that you can improve the building performance to how it should have been, reduce that solar heat gain, improve your ventilation, improve your cooling capacity, or redirect it into those spaces, then now you have expanded your capacity by actually avoiding the reduction of capacity that you were anticipating because you've learned that the building can't actually meet its expectations. So a little harder to quantify than say we're going to save this much energy in a year, but again, numbers on a spreadsheet. And then, of course, on the strategic side, we're all in hospitality, so we are focused on what the guest experience is like. Yes, that translates into savings or revenue generation. Can you avoid the comps, or can you attract more guests? Can you improve your reputation so that the reviews are generating more footfall, or are you getting more repeat groups? So you impress a group with your attractive and comfortable facility. This year, they come back and they tell their friends, and other groups come as well. The better indoor environmental quality, if you're avoiding carbon dioxide buildup, for instance, in your meeting spaces, your office spaces, then and meetings as well, then you have more productive conversations, more beneficial interactions of staff, and a better operating environment. Happier employees, healthier employees. If you had humidity issues that are leading to mold conditions, maybe even if it's not visible, it's just the spores are in the air, or it's a little stuffy or close or uncomfortable, that decreases the health of your staff and also your guests, but certainly impactful to your operation and your revenue. So how do you evaluate this empirically? I think everybody on this call has probably seen the arithmetic here in the middle in some capacity, where you have a motor that replacing it or improving it with a variable speed drive or some similar type of change to the motor. Let's say it costs 13,000 pounds. Well, the simple payback of that, if it saves 850 pounds a year in higher efficiency or in reduced runtime, simple payback is something like 15 years. Not very attractive. However, if we are looking at our assets, if we are valuing our assets based on the net operating income, then that 850 pounds a year has a 15x multiplier if you have a generous 6 or 7% capitalization rate. So cap that at 6 or 7, you look at it as a 13,000 pound improvement to your asset value. Well, now this motor has generally paid for itself in 1 year by lowering your net operating income, increasing your asset value, and regardless of its long payback, it is justifiable. So another example is an energy management system. Maybe in a small hotel that saves 2,500 pounds. At 15 times multiplier, that's closer to 38,000 pounds in asset value. So by not prioritizing these ROI projects, by going for the new carpets or the new design concept for the restaurant or sexier lighting in the lobby, you are actually postponing asset value creation, or alternatively looking at that as destroying value that you should have been creating in this year. And if you have a $13,000 carpet replacement that you were considering doing this year because, yes, it's a little tired and there's some wear marks and maybe a hydrogen peroxide stain over there in the corner, I get it. You want to replace that. You want to make the facility look better. But if you do the motor this year, then it will have essentially paid for itself next year, and you have that 13,000 pounds again available to spend on the carpet. I like to see this as buy one CapEx project, get a second one free of equal or lesser value. Call now and we can set you up with a deal. So you have to, of course, reach those direct quantifications, and we'll touch on that in the next few slides. How do you actually empirically achieve the spreadsheet numbers that I'm talking about here? You have a lot of data available to you if you are at the facility and you want to quantify this for your asset management team. You could potentially get the interval data from the utility company, especially electricity companies are providing 15-minute intervals or 1-hour intervals showing you exactly how much you're consuming at any given moment throughout the year. You can compare cooling season to one of the shoulder months in the spring or in the autumn and see, okay, my cooling equipment is probably using this, judging from how much the energy goes up and down, energy consumption goes up and down at any given time. If you have your chiller cycling and you have 15-minute data, then you can see as the chiller comes up and ramps down, I can see the direct impact on my energy bills or my energy consumption. You can also do this with a building management system, trending the specific pieces of equipment that are under control by the BMS. So you can see exactly how much your chiller is running or that pump that is failing and needs to be replaced. See how much energy it's consuming, or at least how many hours it's running throughout a day or a month or a year. If you have the ability, you can put local submeters on your equipment, measure exactly the piece of equipment you want to justify replacing, and show how much it's running at any given time. And if you don't have any way to actually quantify a specific piece of equipment you can estimate. Take its size, its size and power, so how many kilowatts of energy it consumes, and how often you think it runs. If it's a 24/7, 365 motor, that's easy. That's 87, 60 hours in a year times the equipment size. If it runs intermittently, then you can make some estimations of that runtime. And all of that multiplied by your unit cost of energy gives you the actual direct savings. So let's dig into using that data to prioritize how you would approach your investments throughout the portfolio. So utility price. Obviously, if you have 15 assets that are all asking for capital expenditures, how do you figure out which one gets the most attention or gets the attention first? The utility price, how much that hotel pays for energy, is a very good place to start. 1,000 kilowatt hour reduction in one hotel might be worth twice that of another one because the unit cost of energy is just that much higher. Water price as well. There are also other bill aspects such as the demand charges, capacity charges. If your building has spikes in energy consumption, that might set a capacity charge that carries on for another 12 months. They say, oh, you use this much energy at any given time, we have to charge you that is such that you may use that much energy all the time. So for the next 12 months, you pay for one spike. That can be a very painful example of a direct cost. So the higher the unit price, the higher the financial return of an investment in reducing consumption at that hotel. You can also look at the total utility spend of the hotel. So you may have a limited service hotel or something very small with a 75,000 pound annual expenditure, or a much larger facility, full service with a conference in a downtown area, a lot of traffic. That might have a 750,000 pound expenditure. And even if their unit cost of energy is lower, so every kilowatt hour of reduction is actually less impactful, essentially you have more fish in the barrel to shoot. So if you have a lot of complex systems, a lot of interacting systems, this space is heating and cooling next to this space, which may be trying to serve a different demand, then there are many more opportunities to actually make reductions, and reductions can be more impactful. So I would say I'd probably look at the large consumption, the 750,000 pound total energy expenditure versus the unit rate of energy if there is a dramatic disparity between two hotels. All things equal, unit cost of energy tends to win out. And then a term that I just sort of coined for this presentation is performance intensity. Energy use intensity is the industry standard for measuring whether a building is wasteful or not in terms of energy. How much energy does it consume for the amount of floor area that it has? But as we all know in hospitality, floor area doesn't matter all that much. You have a lot of repeated floors above in your guest tower, above the pedestal and above the central operations. And that doesn't matter as much as, say, room nights, capacity, food covers. So we are more interested in cost per key, for instance, than we are in cost per square meter. So what I've done is say, well, we have cost per square meter as a general guideline. And yes, that gives us some indication of performance. But instead, on this next chart, we can show you how that may compare to a performance intensity in this space for the hotel industry. So across the bottom of the x-axis, we have energy use intensity, the consumption of electricity per the floor area. And the lower intensity, more efficient hotels are on the left, the higher ones are on the right. But on the y-axis, we've shown for hotels specifically the energy consumption in per occupied room. And as you see, there's a correlation. The more efficient by area hotels are also typically more efficient by guest count, occupied room, but not necessarily. So in the 14 to 15 EUI range, we have one at the very bottom and one at the very top, showing that for guest efficiency per guest, the same hotel that could generally empirically look the same in traditional metrics is actually much less efficient. So Coral Bay Resort is a much less efficient example here by guest than any other hotel, even though there are more energy intensive buildings to the right of that, Kensington, for example. What we care about most is the Coral Bay Resort. And that's how I would suggest that we look at this in the hotel industry specifically, as well as going back to the previous slide, what with additional intangible metrics on it as well. Sorry about mincing my words here. We have prioritization factors that aren't necessarily as easily quantified. We have the ownership life cycle. Clearly you're going to be making decisions not in a vacuum, but where this asset is in its life cycle. Are you about to sell it? Are you about to put it on the market so you want it to be refreshed and ready for buyer traffic? Did you just buy it and you have liberty to make a lot of expenses right away? That's of course a factor. Again, guest experience, if you are getting particularly low scores or groups that are choosing not to renew or comps, that's a factor. Equipment condition, if your equipment is nearing the end of its life, and even if it's not particularly a great candidate for energy savings, but you have to replace it anyway, let's look at the incremental cost of making it more efficient or moving it up a couple of years in the cycle, because you know that's coming and you might as well start the payback clock a little sooner for that particular equipment. And then the climate context. All these hotels may not be in the same climate. So you might have a more harsh climate where you really do need to prioritize some lower energy savings, some lower direct cost investments, simply because that equipment's going to get beat up faster in a marine environment, for instance, or because it just fails sooner. So don't expect that a deferred capital investment in one hotel might do as well as it would in another if that's a harsh environment. Maybe we can get away with another year here, or maybe not, because it's on an island and it's subject to wind and salt. So of course, not everything is directly empirical, and we do understand that everything has to be decided in the context of its environment and in the portfolio. So I know I've thrown a lot of information, a lot of terms, and tried to explain a lot of nuance here. But if we come down to the basics, how do you prioritize the projects at a site level? Again, if you are the building engineer or a building manager making a request to asset managers, first, the financial return. The highest ROI to the lowest. What ROI can be in whatever terms you wish, if that's simple payback, net present value, internal rate of return, or if you have a hurdle rate that you're trying to clear, the best number goes at the top. Again, these are investments and they're supposed to make returns for that investment. Lowest simple payback, again, even if you have hurdle rates and IRRs that interest your investment managers, typically we're seeing 3 to 5 year payback is the rule. If it's 1 year or less, go for it. Just throw it into this year, get it done, and it'll start paying for itself very quickly. Prioritize the quick wins. Maybe they're not the sexiest, maybe they're not the most interesting, but if they're going to return quickly, put them on the list, get them done, and start that payback clock right away. Guest experience, I would say, before we discussed operational impacts, having a quantifiable space on the spreadsheet, but the guest experience, we're hotels after all. Of course, if any of these improvements that are being recommended are going to reduce hot calls, cold calls, noise, odor, mold, reduce guest complaints in general and comps, that's a very high priority as well, even if it isn't the best ROI compared to some of the other options. Also look for economies of scale but be careful of interaction factors. So if you can knock out several projects that are related, and have your contractor there once, that's great. But several projects might actually reduce the relative benefit. So if you have a lighting control, classic example is you make your lighting more efficient, but you also install switches that have it turn off more often. Well, you can't get the full benefit of your efficient lighting and the full benefit of your reduced runtime because less runtime is going to make the savings benefit of lower wattage less attractive. There's going to be an interaction that you have to be careful of, and you don't claim that you'll save all the energy of lower wattage and all the energy of less runtime. You have to be careful about that interaction. And then operational impact, I hate to put the employees at the bottom of the list, but if it's not easy to quantify how much the carbon dioxide reduction is going to provide, or the improved daylight, or the better thinking, or the better conversation flow from an indoor environmental quality, it's hard to justify that in a CapEx plan. But I want everybody to understand that that's there and that's real and that will show up over time in the improved use of the space. So all of those roll up into your CapEx, or shall we say capital investment plan, and should help you make a more justifiable case either to your asset manager or your investment manager and executive team when evaluating whether or not these projects are deemed worthy of moving forward. So, as I said, that's a lot. I've thrown a lot of information at you, and I've thrown a lot of twists and turns, but that's exactly what Considerate is here to help you with through our asset assessment services, through our evaluation of decarbonisation and energy efficiency strategies, and through our on-hand, on-site look at facilities. We can answer a lot of these questions for you. And I'll hand it back to Nick to describe that process.
Thanks, Mark. Conscious of time, I'm going to try and get through these last couple of slides pretty quickly because we do want to give a little bit of space for you to have any of your questions answered. So Mark's just shown you how you can prioritize a robust list of measures, but how do you actually get to that robust list of measures? One option, of course, is to work with us, and that's typically done through one of our energy and carbon assessments. So what does that involve? We start with a pre-assessment phase. So we look at least 2 years worth of energy data or utility data to establish not just your baseline consumption, but also your cost exposure. We'll then link that to operational metrics such as occupancy or food covers to understand what is really driving consumption. Is it demand-led, or is it more driven by external factors like climate? We'll also review any technical documentation or prior studies, and we'll speak with the on-site teams to understand pain points. And basically, what all of this does is it ensures that when we arrive on site, we're able to be as focused and targeted as possible. During the on-site assessment, we'll take a detailed look at all key systems, HVAC, lighting, controls, the building envelope. We'll assess how they're performing in reality, including looking at the BMS functionality, and we'll identify both inefficiencies and opportunities. Importantly, we look at both strategic CapEx opportunities and low or no cost operational improvements, what we often refer to as quick wins. Following the visit, we move into data-led recommendations. So we'll quantify each measure in terms of energy, cost, and carbon impact, and assess financial metrics such as payback period and return on investment. This gives you a structured list of both capital and operational interventions. And finally, we develop an investment roadmap because we know that not everything can be done at once. So we prioritize actions over time, identifying what should be done immediately, what aligns with equipment replacement cycles, and what might become more viable as market conditions change. We validate all that with the on-site teams and present it in a way that supports decision-making at asset manager and investor level. And ultimately, the aim is to turn site-level insights into a clear, defensible business case for investment. I'm actually going to skip the next slide and move straight on to just discussing our new feature in Conserve. So one feature that we've launched in the last few months on Conserve is the AI retrofit module. So the way that the AI retrofit module works is designed to generate you a portfolio of retrofit measures, including estimated costs, savings, and payback periods using the data that's already available on the platform, combined with a small number of additional inputs. It's important to stress it's not intended to replace a detailed on-site energy assessment, but rather to complement it. It's particularly useful as a scalable solution across a wider portfolio, or as a first step for lower priority assets. For example, you may have already prioritized a subset of properties for full energy assessments based on performance, as Mark showed you previously, or based on their strategic importance. However, this still leaves a large portion of your portfolio where you may not yet have a clear investment plan. And this module allows you to continue making progress across those assets rather than waiting. In terms of how it works, the model uses existing energy and water consumption data within Conserve, combined with qualitative building data, which is captured through a structured survey that should be completed by the on-site technical teams. The survey covers areas such as building fabric, systems, and controls. Once that information is in place, you can define key parameters, such as budget and whether your priority is energy or carbon reduction. The AI engine then generates a prioritized list of interventions, including estimated savings, costs, and return metrics. Crucially, it also aligns these recommendations with the CREM 1.5-degree pathway, allowing you to understand how future-proof your investment strategy is. The output is a clear, data-driven investment plan, which helps guide decision-making at both asset and portfolio level, and supports a more structured approach to prioritization. I was originally going to do a quick demonstration of the platform, but given the time constraints, we'll move straight to the Q&A section. Obviously, if anyone is interested in seeing more about the AI investment module within Conserve, please do reach out and I would be delighted to give you a tour of it.
Thank you, Mark and Nick. Thanks. That's fantastic information you shared with us. And there were some really practical insights there, which I'm sure a lot of the audience will have found really helpful. We are conscious of time as well, so we've got time just for a couple of questions. There are a couple that have come through actually on the same topic, which I think we'll address first. So what if the data that people have isn't perfect? Can you still make an impact with imperfect data?
I think I'll let Mark take the start of this and then I'll chime in where necessary.
Sure. Data is never perfect, and that's where we as industry experts come in. So both in the building environment and building systems, we have to make educated guesses. But in existing buildings, as most of these portfolios are, we do actually have a measure of what the building is currently consuming. So we have bounds on our estimates, but also within hospitality, we need to know what's feasible. A solution that may be fine in a commercial office space or retail space would be a no-go in a hotel. So we try to make educated guesses, but also based on our experience, based on what we already know about the hotel and how it's performing, and then try not to do anything that will negatively impact the guest experience. And we end up arriving at a fairly small subset or a small range of possible data possibilities that we can use for our estimations.
And at the risk of sounding too philosophical, I think it's also important to not let perfect become the enemy of good. So any actions that you take will always have a positive impact.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I think we'll try and squeeze in one last question before we close. How much impact can you realistically achieve without a large CapEx budget?
Without a large CapEx budget, I would align this, I guess, sort of with the retro commissioning or recommissioning, which we call the RCX approach. So how do you get a building to operate the way it's supposed to, or can you actually improve its operation with some adjustments along the way to better than it was designed? But ultimately, making the building work is what you can expect to work correctly, is what you can expect without a large capital outlay. And in an RCX, we typically see between 3 and 8 years a simple payback. I'm sorry, 3 and 8% energy reduction and water reduction collectively. So if the building is mostly calibrated and it's not too far off, 3% I think is realistic. If it's really has a lot of known problems, 8% is easy to achieve. I've even seen 10 to 12, but 3 to 8 is what we would expect typically.
Yeah, and as I said, as part of our assessments, we do also look at the low and no cost operational improvements, whether it's around SOPs and ensuring the set points of the thermostats in the rooms are being consistently set by housekeeping staff versus what lighting is being left on overnight or left on in rooms prior to checkout versus even using the different seasons to use curtains to keep the heat in or keep the heat out, depending on whether we're in the summer or the winter, and also looking at room allocations in low or shoulder seasons to maybe concentrate all the guests in one wing of the hotel and then be able to sort of scale down the operations in that other wing of the hotel. So it is also important to remember the low-hanging fruits, as we like to sometimes call them.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Mark and Nick, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. For all the unanswered questions, we will get back to you individually to provide answers to those after the session. And we will be sharing a recording of the webinar shortly, so you can go back to it and share it with your team members. If you do have any questions or you'd like to discuss how we can support your organisation, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Our contact details are on the slide there. And thanks again for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.